So OBS backup. All right. So, like everyone knows who you are that listens to me. So I'm here with Morgoth, But I don't know. It's kind of weird pretending you have an audience when you're just like recording. But so. But anyways, it's kind of one of those things that I struggle to think of what to begin with. But I guess right off the top, because it seems that this is like the current thing on Twitter. Yeah, let's go with that actually. How is it being back on the heaven site, or the site between heaven and earth, as I like to call it? How's it been? You've been reinstated by the Muskin Führer, so
yeah, and like they reinstated like the first account that I ever had.
Yeah,
because I've had other ones since then, and some of them had much bigger followings. But I didn't really care. I'll build that back up. But I can only access it on the phone for some reason. Like I'm blocked on the computer and on the laptop. It's this consent flow or something, and there's like a white square pops up. So I just find it fiddly on the phone. But except for that, I think it's better because I'm not really a big phone person, so I kind of like think of it like I'm at a driving range, and you just kind of drive the ball, and you put your hand above your eyes and see how far it goes. But I haven't been dragged into any drama or anything like that. I've just been trying to kind of crank out bangers. That's what they call them, isn't it? Like a banger.
The hot takes, yeah.
Get some hot takes out there. Yeah, it's different. It's different as well because on my Telegram, people used to complain that I didn't have any emojis. There was no comments open, nothing. And now I'm like right back into the mix of it all. Now it feels like you just got people crawling all over your face.
Yeah. It's funny. My good friend Nightmare Vision said the other day, he goes, I just saw like Sargon and Millennial Woes argue with each other back and forth, and I feel like I'm back in 2015. This is amazing. So it's like, all the old people coming back.
And the one I saw, like the kind of the boom, the mic drop, was where Sargon said before, basically, we've been arguing for too long. It's 5 p.m. I'm going out to touch grass. And Millennial Woes replied and said, probably AstroTurf. And it was like,
brutal. That's amazing.
It's like killer, finish him.
That's crazy. I think like Sargon, I've said this, I love his journey, like, because I think like Sargon did bring a lot of us here, and I like how he's evolving. He's getting serious about his beliefs, but at the same time, like there is still like a reversion. Like he still has to pull back, and it's funny seeing him and Woes argue because it's like that. We're back in like 2016 where Sargon will post BBC, black prawn at like alt-righters or something. It's like there's yeah.
It's like even the issue that they're arguing about is like this perennial like problem on the British right. Which is like the mid-century German question.
The painter of Austrians, yeah.
And I got dragged into this years ago with a British right on what I called Bulldog Nationalism. And I made it. It was kind of a quick take video, and I was saying like the limitations of Bulldog Nationalism, and it just all hell broke loose. It's the term itself seemed to catch on, but there was a certain sort of energetic section of the British nationalist scene just thought it was unforgivable, like that as if I was sort of stabbing my own country in the back. And I've never like sort of simped for the mid-century Germans either, but it was just to point out that like we got a problem, and you see it popping up just with the wars and Sargon debate. It's something we don't know how to rectify, and it's that the post-war mythos in Britain is one of like we stood up, we Winston Churchill with the bulldog spirit and with Spitfires, we beat the racists, we beat the bad guys on the continent. We fought for freedom, and fundamentally, it's like we fought for liberalism. Is what it comes down to, and we were victorious. And the problem is that when you then begin to look at, say, solving certain problems that we've got in Britain today, and how we got there, and so when you then propose like nationalism now, you find yourself running against your own sort of cultural meta narrative in the name of defending it, and it's this horrible like no-win situation. And so when somebody like Peter Hitchens says like, oh well, the mid-century Germans were left-wing, and it opens up this really tedious kind of stupid argument, I think, which but what they're trying to do is like sort of, it's like the hot potato. They want the other side to take that on board, you know. And I don't get involved with that anymore. I feel like I've done my bit for on that particular issue. I've been in countless back and forths and all of that.
Yeah, I feel like that was a much older debate within the E-right, at least dating back to those times of like 2015, 2016. But I think nowadays people have much more of a clear head on it, because when you start to do these like weird genealogies of, well, actually it's the Anglos, that they have this view that, you know, Angloliberalism was the apex of like the descent into modernity, and therefore the imperial project of the English was responsible for all of like whatever woes we're finding nowadays. But then again, I think a more nuanced view would be that the British, for all you can talk about Anglo-Atlanticism and so forth, which there is some validity to that. Really, I mean, the real losers were the old empires. Like that's no doubt. And even up until this year, with the conflict in Ukraine, we could see that really America has shown its hand, and that even its, you know, greatest ally of Britain will be thrown under the bus as well. I mean, I don't know if I wanted to ask you about that. If there's so many things to talk about, Morgoth, but what do you think of that? I think that people are much more calm on the issue of like, who's at fault, the British or the Germans or the Americans? But yeah, go ahead. What are your?
I mean, I haven't had much to say about the Ukraine situation, because once again, it was Boris Johnson that went over there and put the blockers on any kind of negotiations, any kind of coming to the table. And my kind of general view on foreign policy is really boring. I tend to just be like an isolationist kind of little Englander mentality. And I'm certainly not like signed up to some sort of, what do they call it, like Turbo America or like Spencer's sort of based
NATO wave ideology,
empire and whatever. I kind of am just a kind of isolationist little Englander, but it isn't because it's like it's a cop out. It's because it's because of the empire. It's because as a people, not really just the English either, like the Scots, the Welsh as well, the British, let's just say collectively. Like we've been meddling around in other people's affairs for hundreds of years, for like 300 to 400 years, fully engaged around in the world. So that the accusation against like the Anglo thing, it does have some truth to it,
right?
And I'm one of the problems is that we've always been outward facing. And the actual the sort of the soil back home has just been kind of blown away, and you end up in this kind of probably the most cooked country in the world, and it's where there's no the kind of the identity of the place is long gone, and I like to have this long era well, Britain, let's say, the City of London, my policy in that would be that I would turn it into a nature park. I would have
Oh man.
I've long said that I would just turn the City of the London would just the nice statues and whatnot. I would they could be there in the nature park for people to see, but all of the banks and all of the political centres, and I would relocate to York or somewhere like that, so like a provincial town somewhere. To have the capital city, which would be in keeping with the size of the country that it actually is.
Yeah.
I like the idea of this kind of, which that would be a part of, just this long kind of period where we didn't do this kind of thing. Finally, we kind of just came home and cleaned house and got ourselves in order before we disappear. To get straight to the point. And so I do have a kind of very dovish attitude towards the foreign affairs, and it's not just because it's like easy. It's because the English have been on the front lines of this for hundreds of years, and it's always been the normal people back home that have suffered for it.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of a few things. One would be like for like us Italians, I'm in a weird position because I am also a product of the Commonwealth, being in Canada. And it almost reminds me of like us Italians, like after after Rome, we sort of just like sat back and we're like, well, we did it. And I guess we're going to retreat into our culture. And even though many peoples have conquered our shores, they all still had like this weird admiration for what we did and what we are. And so I guess like being from a stronger culture, like yourself, being from a product of Britannia, you have sort of a different view of it than I would say like subjugated peoples or who peoples that were a product of a greater empire that have an intense like ethno resentment towards them. But also reminds me, like you were saying about the nature preserve idea. It reminds me of like what the painter Anselm Kiefer talked about, where he talks about why he paints so many sunflowers because there was this, of course, like there's this like lib academic who's like, well, after the mid-century German regime, maybe Germany itself could become like a huge field, like a sunflower farm. That would be like the
Yeah,
ultimate justice, blah blah blah. But here is like more of like what you're saying is more of like a, I would say like a rightist version of that idea where the British could retreat into a sort of I know Little Englander gets like, it's weird because depending on who uses it could be a pejorative or a source of strength, but the British can retreat back into into themselves in a way that isn't so globalized, in a way it's like isn't suffering from the sort of shade of the collapse of the empire.
yeah.
Because now it's like, oh, it's like, like there is this thread today by this, who's this guy? Russ Jones talking
Oh
about,
yeah,
yeah, you saw, yeah,
I
yeah,
saw
where
it.
it's like we need to accept the third world, Britain needs to accept the third world because of the mixture of like the Danes and the Germans that went, and the French that have went into England historically. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. I'm stringing ideas right now, but you go ahead, my friend.
There was an HSBC advert some years ago, about 4 years ago, that you would see on the sides of buses and whatnot, and they had this a similar kind of thing that he was seeing, where it's like your wine is from France, or and your beef is from Argentina,
Hmm.
your spaghetti bolognese is from Italy, and your phone is from China, and it lists all of these kind of products off, and it's kind of like it was after Brexit. It was as if like
Yeah.
global after the Brexit vote, there was this kind of they like gave like the Little Englanders a sort of punishment beating, where
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
advertisements would be like this. It was this kind of this is what you're turning your back on. This is like the modern, wonderful, globalized world where all of these products are delivered to your door. My sort of thing was like, I know, but we're not just consumers. Like
Yeah.
all of these things that you're listing off here are just consumer items supplied by corporations. there's more to a people than that. I always reminded of the David Bowie video, Let's Dance, where the two, if I remember it rightly, there's like an Aborigine couple come in from the outback, and then they go into like the suburbs of Melbourne or Sydney or somewhere, and you've got David Bowie singing the song like Let's Dance, and he becomes like a mechanic or something, and she finds a job in a supermarket, and they get dressed up and they're wearing jeans, and and then at the end you can see there's a look in their eyes. They're looking at each other in this way as to say, we're not happy in this world. And they walk back into the outback, and they throw their Nike trainers behind them, and they leave them dangling on the bush as they head back into the outback. I always saw that was a beautiful sentiment, that's kind of like what I'd like the English to do. It's the exact opposite of what HSBC are kind of are proposing and getting into. I mean, just on the sort of the English thing as well, is that what you touched on before, like we are last in line to have any kind of victim sort of. We're not allowed any victim status whatsoever. The only other people who could go, like, will be in the running for that will be the Germans and, like, say, like white Americans, WASPs, And I was in Ireland last week or the week before. It was the first time that I'd visited. It was beautiful. I really liked it. And I got like a few sort of snarky comments off some of the Irish, just low level. There was a lot of other people. I mean, I met a couple of people there from the internet, and but there was I did a video on YouTube as well, and there was a few people popped up in the comments, and it was kind of like, yeah, well, now you're coming over to our country. And by the way, I was only there for like a long weekend, but the sentiment was, yeah, well, now you're coming over, and we don't want you here. We definitely don't want you. And part of that was because Tommy Robinson went over to kind of grift and kind of sort of hijack their protesting. And I was like, and there was obviously there's a lot of them like my stuff and whatnot, and there was like back and forth, and they were saying like, you don't understand, like when Morgoth says he's going to come over and visit the mountains, like it literally will be him like standing on a mountain or looking at the sea and just talking. He's not he's not joking, like that really would, because they were like, oh yeah, you're going to come all the way over here to like stare at the sea. And I was like, yeah. Have you ever seen me content? And but what I thought was interesting was the you know how that Noel Ignatieff wrote that book, How the Irish Became White.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's the one everyone cites to be like, well, there's no such thing as
Yeah. Like if you look at what he was getting at there, I thought it was interesting because the resentment against the English is obviously with all the troubles, and I get that, but the problem they've got is that that's not going to help them now, and they have to adjust themselves, because for a long time this is where their politics became kind of weird and cooked. So this is how it was very easy for Sinn Féin or even the IRA. They'd be like, because they had a framing where the Irish were an oppressed people alongside the Palestinians, say.
Yes, exactly.
And so there was like this universal sort of Marxist element to it. And
it's third worldism, really. Like that's an embrace of third worldism, yeah.
And so the English, especially the City of London, and the aristocracy would be then the oppressor class. But if to go back to Noel Ignatieff's book, of course, what he was getting into there was that there was this sort of ethnogenesis happened when the Irish went over at first. You see this in Gangs of New York as well. It's a good movie for that. Where at first the Irish were resented, but then as the decades pass, you see they begin to become policemen. They begin to merge with the broader WASP sort of power structure. And this is actually what Noel Ignatieff was getting at, because when I remember reading this huge article about it at Countercurrent, and just the title alone just seems ridiculous. Like, what do you mean the Irish became? Of course, the Irish are white. But when you've got all of this talk about whiteness and white privilege, which wasn't really around as much then you begin to see what he was actually getting at. Because what he means is that the Irish joined the white power structure.
Yes.
They transitioned from being an oppressed people to being part of the oppressor bloc. And so now when you've got the situation in Ireland, is that old narrative where they kind of being sort of as the oppressed against the English, that's not going to fly anymore. And it's not going to fly anymore precisely because they became white in the eyes. So now now you see it now. They're getting called friends of ours. They're getting called racist. They're getting called far right. It's the exact same kind of template which is being used everywhere else. But you'll find that there's no longer that space for the Irish victimhood, because now they are white. Now they are part of, in the eyes of our enemies and the globalists, they are now just like everybody else. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, finish.
Well, I was just going to say, like the English, like the English were towards the Irish. The Irish on that now in relation to all of the Somalians or whatever it is that bring in the Republic.
Yeah, but what's so funny about that though, about the Irish, is that there'll occasionally be a reversion where you could switch them in the eyes of like the prevailing ideology, depending on the narrative. You could like sort of switch them into what I like to call like wholesome Chungus nationalism, right? Like wholesome Chungus Gladio nationalism, where it's like, for example, when the Queen died. Now I was pretty like bummed about the Irish response as well. My father, he remembers a much older time in Canada, Dominion, where there was still like some linkage there to the crown. And it's funny because I remember the narrative was that now the Irish, they're sort of like the other various colonized peoples of the British, where they're like just like people in Cameroon and Somalia and Palestine, and it's like all the wholesome Chungus liberation movements. But then, of course, now that the Irish, now that they're sort of protesting mass migration and so forth, it's like now they're not good enough anymore. So when the Queen died, they were good to be like third worldist Marxists. Now that they're protesting mass immigration, now they're just white people again. And I guess like before, when they legalized that other certain medical procedure that we can't, I'm kind of weary about saying on YouTube, and women crying tears of joy in the streets. Now they're good though. They're good again. So it's like the Irish, they're one of those, it's one of those cases where they sort of have to suffer the machinations of the prevailing ideology in terms of what their place is. It's like they're white people one day and they're evil, protesting immigration. Now they're like, when it suits like going against the British, which is the greater evil, now they're all of a sudden it's like they're a minority again. So it's like
and this is where like it gets back to where we started, because this is where I do have a bit of sort of, I do understand where Sargon's coming from, because at the end of the day there's going to be a temptation where you say, you know what, I don't care. I think the empire was glorious. We civilized the world and we made the world a better place. It was a little bit ugly, but if it wasn't for us, you'd all still be rolling around in the bogs.
Just giga chat it, be like, yes.
You just brave face it out. And to be, that is actually the default position of the British, to be honest. But of course, then you get sort of stabbed in the back from the media, who obviously they want you in the role of like the evil oppressor.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, what's happening in Ireland is certainly very interesting, though. Like the protests, I would never expect it, but I feel like there was such a like at the time. I remember me and Prude talked about this about there's sort of the way that the Queen united Britain from its past into the future, and that cut has been that's been severed. Like there's a sort of now a cut between the 20th century and nowadays, and now the UK in general is sort of like like that thread, like, oh, the fact that you have so many different nations have conquered Britain, and now has been in Britain conquered other people, therefore you're inherently multicultural, and there's like nothing left. But I don't know, have people asked you before about the British? I mean, about the Irish? I know you've gotten pushback, but then did Tommy Robinson go over that? That's not kind of trying to co-opt the protests. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it seems to have fizzled out. I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
latest was, but there was. I don't actually know what the situation in Ireland is now, but there was this thing where, oh, look at this, there's this grassroots movement, the Irish normal people. I mean, and it really was. It was women with push chairs and everything,
Yeah.
and then it was like Tommy Robinson was like, yeah, I'm going to go over and I'm gonna cover it as a journalist. And the Irish were straight away, well, we don't want you, we don't want your baggage, we don't want all the Brits coming over. Like, this is our thing, and that was my point. I was like, look, I'm not going over. I'm going over for a mixture of personal, which was true, and I'm also going to just enjoy the countryside and go for long walks and things, which is exactly what I did. So it was never my intention to get mixed up in the politics at all. Because they're right, it is their thing,
Yeah.
But
exactly.
yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a kind of certain kind of Irish girl that I saw as well, like working in the restaurants, where they're very kind of small and very softly spoken, and you just think like, what it's just as an archetype, it's just really lovely, it's just really wholesome. And
Oh
you
yeah.
think, oh, I wonder if this is just being put on because, like, I'm getting a meal and whatnot. But I was like, no, I think this is genuine. I think there is this type, there is this thing to them which is very sweet. But I hope it can be retained in Clown World, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, for some reason, us Italians, we couldn't resist the Irish women. So that's, in America. It's funny because us Italians, we also had this transformation where we're kind of like Asians at one point in North America, where it's like you're kind of a minority, but kind of not. But but now we're just, we're white people now. So
Another thing that I because I'm talking about victim complexes and whatnot, and as like the first victims of the empire were the English working class themselves.
mhm.
And but as I say, like we aren't. It's not that we're not allowed a victim narrative. It's just that people would think it was ridiculous because we were then in sort of enveloped into the wider kind of empire. Everybody had their place, even
Yeah.
if it was nailing rivets onto a ship or working down the coal mines. The whole of the nation was involved in this giant enterprise. But the fact is, it was rough. I mean, me and Endeavour did classic movies where it was like a few weeks ago, and we
Oh
did
yeah.
Mutiny on the Bounty and HMS Defiant. And they were literally, what do you call it, when there was like men on the docks and they were in a tavern and they were just being dragged out and thrown onto the boats. I
Press
forgot.
gagging.
Yeah, they were press ganged, and that was the thing. You either went down the mains and there was another part of it where, like, you could be like a farmer, a farm boy from Dorset, and you'd end up like building a road, building a railway line across the Himalayas and standing down, standing in the jungles of Burma.
Yeah.
So there was that. But I did one of those 23andMe things, and I like on to see like my own sort of heritage, and it was 100%, well, white British, but it was basically, I was 25% Irish. There was like 20% Scots, but it's different because it's like north, east, and this kind of
Yeah.
thing. But what I had almost nothing of was like actual Middle England. The actual, it was as if my ancestor had just gone all the way around the coastlines of the British Isles. But the biggest surprise for me was that it came back. The biggest percentage was Welsh,
Oh,
and
interesting.
I knew about the Irish on my mother's side. So that my grandfather was from Cork, so that didn't surprise me very much at all. On my grandfather's side, anyway. But I'd assumed that on my dad's side, they'd basically just been here in the northeast, sitting in coal dust, like since the beginning of time. And
The ones that Thatcher got rid of. Yeah.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
well,
Maggie.
we can come to that. But like what I thought was interesting was that I was really shocked. Like I didn't like 32% Welsh or whatever it was. Like, it was like by far the biggest part. And I got on a Survivor Jive, and I showed him the chart, and I said, I really didn't expect this. And he gave a take, which I'll get onto in a minute. And then the other day, I was out walking in the woods, and there was a local historian there, and I told the story again. I was surprised. And now, what had happened? The reason for this was that in the 1800s, I think it was in the 1850s, in the northeast, where it was all coal mining, you were basically a slave class.
Yeah, you were like an indentured serf almost.
Yeah. So
In multiple generation as well, coal mining.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the person, the mine owner, the industrialist, would also own like all of the houses in the village and the
The
school.
company town. Yeah.
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 And what happened in the 1850s was that they all got together, and all the miners got together, and they went on strike. They wanted more safety regulations and more rights or whatever. And what they did was arrange to have, they basically shipped up a lot of miners from Wales. And there was a song which he directed me called the Black Leg Miners or something like that. I forgot it now. But there's even a folk song about it anyway. And that was what happened. So the local Geordies went on strike. So they shipped up a load of Welsh miners to break the strike
As
and do the work.
scabs. Yeah.
Yeah, scabs, yeah.
Oh,
And
man.
there's folk songs about how much they were hated, and but yeah, they settled here and mingled in. So you end up with this thing where a lot of the people in the northeast have got a lot of Welsh blood in them because of that. And it's just an example of what the ruthlessness of like the English system, you know. And that, in a way, it's created like a sort of ethnogenesis within the British Isles. Just the Industrial Revolution and the needs of the engine, the needs of keeping the engine powering along. It's a funny old tale, but we aren't allowed to kind of, because you could say, oh, we were all uprooted from our little towns and villages where this kind of rootless people because of the Industrial Revolution. And there is a deeper take on that. But just in terms of the empire, like nobody gives. Like nobody really moans about it because you're too busy kind of in the grand production of it all.
Yeah, and that model even replicated throughout everywhere the British went. I mean, even here in Canada, my ancestors, the first ones that came over here, on my father's side, helped build the Welland Canal. And it's funny because the British were always like the company heads. They're at the top, the very top. They were the ones being commissioned. For some reason, the Scottish were really good engineers and middle management people. And of course, the Irish, Italians, and Chinese were the ones doing like the physical labor. So it's like even in the Commonwealth, even like in the far, across the pond, that model still like, took hold. But it's funny, like you were saying about the empire. There is a sense in which like the post-empire Britain, because the empire was slipped away very silently in some ways, in some regards, that there is a weird feeling about it. I remember, I think it was some video essayist, and I want to get to the video essayist eventually, but was talking about the difference between like in post-war, post-empire Britain, the difference between Adam Curtis and Mark Fisher, where like Mark Fisher, of course, like his acid communism thing, it was like, there was like a hope of, the aesthetic of 70s Britain, the music, like there was hopefulness, but yet the vision of Adam Curtis in a lot of films, like even his more recent one about the what was it called? I forget. Not Trauma Zone, the one before Trauma Zone, where it talks about the post-war, post-empire Britain, that it was filled with like, fearful people, and that they didn't know what to do, and then, immigrants that came from, other places that Britain conquered, that they were expecting to go to the motherland, but they found the little Englanders huddled and scared, and I don't know if you watched that one. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I remember it, and it's like they'd seen these visions of London with all of this pomp and the great Edwardian architecture, and what they get are these kind of misty, rainy sort of terraced housing, which the council has paid for, and people lining up for the dole queue and all of that kind of thing. I mean, I actually I love Pink Floyd, and some of their songs on, and I know like it's absolute boomer central, which is one of the, which I did like, especially like you can kind of follow the whole arc of Pink Floyd, even up to today, where like Dave Gilmour's like just the archetype of a shitlib, and the Roger Waters is
very kind of tragic.
Roger Waters is kind of, he's one of those kind of sort of base lefties, like George Galloway types.
Yeah, and he's like old labor type.
Yeah, which is fine, I'll take anti-establishment where I can find it these days, but a lot of their songs, like The Wall and The Final Cut, especially the Roger Waters, where this is why the band broke up as well, because he was just too political, and he was getting on everybody's nerves.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's some of the ones on The Final Cut where he talks about this. He talks about like everything's now. There was this kind of promise, the post-war dream, you'll call it, because his dad actually died in World War II. I think he was in the RAF, and he paints these pictures, of like, because we got in the middle of all the gloom, like we got the Falklands War. And for Roger Waters, he describes this. It's beautifully like the lyrics, and she stands upon Southampton dock with her greying hair and her summer frock, ready to wave the boys goodbye again. And it's kind of like she would have been this young woman during World War II. And now, like the war machine, the capitalist pig war machine, it needs more blood, more sacrifice. And so the same woman is like standing in the rain on Southampton dock, like waving the boys off to war once again. I like it.
That's pretty profound. Yeah.
It suits my disposition. The Pink Floyd stuff. I did an essay on the Substack of the song "Not Now, John," which is also got great lyrics, and on that one, it's a kind of critique of Thatcherism and Reagan, like neoliberalism in the 80s. Where do you know which one I mean? Because the lyrics are just great. Because I'm going to look that up. Just a second. Because
no problem. I think I know what song you're referring. I think I've listened to it before.
It's really bombastic. And like the words are like, for that we've got to get on with these. We've got to compete with the wily Japanese. There's too many home fire burning and not enough trees. what is it? Oh, yeah. Can't stop, lose job, mine gone, silicon, stroll on, what bomb, get away, payday, make a breakdown, need fix, big six, click, click, hold on, oh no, bingo. And it's just goes on about it, and it's got like this in the background, it's like just these huge pistons, like, and it's like this chunting and groaning of a machine that's just gonna keep sputtering out. Yeah, for that, we've got to get on with these. Got to complete with a whiny Japanese. No need to worry about the Vietnam peace. And then it's like a big laughing. Got to bring the Russian bear to his knees. Well, maybe not the Russian bear, maybe the Swedes. We showed Argentina. Now let's go and show these. Make us feel tough, and wouldn't Maggie be pleased? So it's all about, yeah, you can see where they're going with it.
This is classic old labor critique of like neoliberal Thatcherite, like yeah. But it seems based in hindsight now. Like
it was accurate though, wasn't it? Because the thing is, I mean, there's the pits, and I got into that on a stream with Greg Johnson as well, where it's like, what do you do? Because when Thatcher closed the pits, the reason for that, which just destroyed the fabric of where I grew up. And it's kind of interesting because like by the time you get to the 80s, the unions were very strong. Like the miners were only working like 6 hours a day. They all had houses. They were earning a lot of money. I know they were. Because houses weren't that well, they would be living in their council houses. There's a thing with that as well, but the miners weren't doing too bad at all, actually. And by that time, the safety regulations had been sorted out and everything. And it was seen that the mines just weren't worth it. They were operating at a loss. And so they were all just closed. It was all just shut down. But what Thatcher also did was make it possible for people to buy their council houses, which is what my family did. But and I remember when I was growing up, when I was a boy, like everybody, it was kind of a cliche, but everybody knew everybody on the estate. But
it was like that, like BritTube show, like Last of the Summer Wine or something like that. Yeah, like the Little England aesthetic,
Well, yeah, but it was like it had that kind of post-industrial feel to it, where it was just large housing estates. But what I did notice was that my dad's mate lived in the same street. They'd been mates forever. He had his family there. And they began to put they bought their house as well, and they would put like an extension on. They'd get new kitchen in, and we weren't quite able to, like, my parents weren't quite able to compete. It was always, but and you see what was coming in there was where, instead of being a settled community where like everybody was just kind of the same. People began to compete against each other in material terms. Everybody became like sort of competitors in a market space, which is exactly the sort of the worldview of Thatcher, where everybody would just compete against each other in a marketplace, which made things even worse, to be honest, because then people with drive began to buy and sell their own houses and then move up the property ladder. But it meant that the people who were left on the estates, they just became sink estates. It just turned to crap. Just went down the tubes.
The council flats, yeah. And I mean, look at nowadays, right? It's funny, like I had this argument with my old man because he's such a boomer con, right? Like, and he's like, "Oh, well, Thatcher, she had to do it." I'm like, "Well, what about the miners, right? Oh, they were inefficient. She had to do it. They were the unions. They had to get rid of the unions because, like, it's because in the 80s he was like, oh, NAFTA was good, and it's like, Mulrooney was good and Thatcher was good, and I'm like, no, I don't know, like this is kind of bad actually what happened in hindsight, like all of the like free market fundamentalism, but now he's coming around to that idea. But it is funny though, like having lived through it, how the sort of those values very quickly led into like whatever you want to call like global nowadays, at least in part,
Yeah,
there
you
was,
got
yeah.
and in Britain you got a kind of grace period, which was mainly I'm not that old,
Hmm.
but my kind of glory years would have been the 90s,
Oh yeah.
especially going into the late 90s. And during the 90s, you did get this kind of grace period where the worst of the poverty in the north had kind of abated. The wealth did actually begin to trickle a little bit. You begin to see some service jobs coming in. It wasn't ideal. It was still pretty bad. But then in the country more generally, it was a kind of period of optimism. I mean, it was another one of them times when the Tory party had been in power like forever. Like they
Hmm.
didn't, I think Thatcher won in like 79, and then Tony Blair came in 1997. So it was just this huge. And another thing is, like, if you compare Britain in 1979 to 1997, it was just this huge difference.
Oh yeah.
You know how people say now, people say, like, oh, nothing really changed in the last 20 years or whatever. It's where history ended and all of this. Like, but the difference in Britain between 1979 and 1997 was absolutely gigantic. Like, everything changed. Everything
Yeah.
changed drastically. So it's like that Mark Fisher says, you can there's times when you can like literally pinpoint the pop songs will come out, everything was always changing, and you can clearly tell the difference in styles just between one year and the next. I mean, I think on the music as well. Like I loved the when I went, I always loved the bit new, like when Joy Division kind of exploded,
Oh
and
yeah.
then New Order came out of the ashes, and they had this sort of little section of a few years where they had this kind of really gloomy kind of hard synth pop, like songs like Procession, and that to me was like almost at a spiritual level, a way that illustrated the north of England that I came from, where all you've got to do is listen to that music, and you think of like high rise brutalist tower buildings and
Yeah.
pe-
Yeah.
people standing outside of Greg's in the rain, and all of this, all of this kind of thing. People wearing like bad haircuts, bad leather jackets, and all of this kind
Well, it
of
was
thing.
like Gary Newman with cars. It was like the car becomes like a place of refuge in like the violent cities, right? Like in certain parts of London. Like that was the still, like that's when like you have that aesthetic sensibility because I quite like some of those brutalist buildings that they built at the time, but I realized like having like probably like living in them was probably not great. Like like it probably wasn't like ideal, but there was I think like a time like in that era of Britain where there was sort of like an excitement or an optimism or there was a sense of like I guess like what you could say that brutalism in general was like a utopian project that never like quite came due for a variety of reasons. I have a much more forgiving take on it, but you could still see like there was still that sentiment there. But then like, but then what happened when the Tories they reigned supreme for so long, but yet I guess you could say the culture of stagnation and sort of like turbo progressivism that we have nowadays, like that they sort of the immune system wasn't really equipped to handle what would come later. And then, of course, by the time the Dark Lord Blair, to quote AA, the Dark Lord Blair came up, it was all over. It was done for. Like, what happened
Yeah,
at that time? Why did the Tories, they never quite managed to, at least in the cultural front, maintain what Britain was? Like, what happened there?
yeah, they had no interest in that. They were running on the fumes of the sort of a general sort of social conservatism within the
Yeah.
population, which it was sort of like the fumes left over, from the standard British Christian civilization,
Yeah.
and throughout. There was a steady decline, even culturally throughout all that time. But it was as if the Conservative Party had this kind of soft paternalistic attitude towards culture, but they were like really serious about economics.
Yeah.
And so this is where you get this thing where well, all they really cared about was economics, really. And I remember when Tony Blair was sort of campaigning, and I had my first job at that time. And I was thinking about, it's funny because I was thinking about bringing this up. But I had this really bad job. It was, I don't want to say it too much because I'll probably end up doxing myself. But
No problem, no worries.
there was only like 15 of us worked in this job, and we had no protections at all. And this is like 97-ish. I was there for a few years. And Tony Blair was campaigning on bringing in the minimum wage. And I think at that time I was on like £3.20 an hour or something.
Oh, man.
And I would get like £120 a week or something like that. And we would work like 11 hours a day. There was like 20 lads did this like mundane job. Basically, it was similar to putting together cheap mirrors. Let's just say that's what I was doing.
Yeah,
where
okay.
you stapled the backs in and everything. And but it was really rough. It was really, really rough. Like the bants was savage. There was no HR or anything like that. It was just people were fighting the factory floor, and the boss, he'd inherited the company, and he would just stand there with like a bacon cheeseburger thing that he got from the local van, just laughing at it.
Oh my god!
There was there was a fella I used to deliver the Molden, and he used to drive up from Liverpool. He was a right rough bastard as well, and we used to have to unload it. There was these huge bundles of wood, and I was like a scrawny 19-year-old or whatever, and it would go down on your shoulder, and your legs would buckle and wobble. Like it's totally, you're just not supposed to do that kind of thing. But what was worse was that the fella from Liverpool, the truck driver, would stand on the back of the truck, and we'd line up to get like these huge chunks of wood put on our shoulder, which were like 5 meters long, and your legs would wobble, and your shoulder blade would be all bruised. And then like you'd get your insult. He'd tear everybody apart as they went up. So you just had to take it. And I still had spots. I had teen acne, and he would say like because the pressure of lifting this ridiculous amount of weight, and my legs would be wobbling. And then he was like, "Look at this! There's so much pressure on his face. His spots are going to burst all over the place." That was another lad. Yeah, it was just brutal. There was another lad, and he was really skinny, and he ended up crying. But he had really big feet. He had like it was really weird looking because he was a skinny lad with no power to him,
like clown shoes.
Yeah, and his grandmother passed away. And the boss only gave him 1 day off
man.
And so it was like literally a day later, and he's standing there, and the truck driver knew what had happened. And he looked down and he says, "Hello, Skinny." He says, "Where'd you bury your grandmother and one of your shoes?" And my
god.
And he just dropped the whole bundle and walked off the job and was never seen again, just broken, just couldn't handle it. And anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. That was what I was doing when Tony Blair came in to that I wanted the minimum wage, basically.
Different world, totally different world than nowadays. Like it's actually, yeah.
I remember what I was thinking of was that I worked with me mate, and another thing where it would be like we'd go out drinking on the weekend. And sometimes we would end up in fights, and we'd have to like against each other, just drunk. And we'd turn up at work with like black eyes and bust lips and scrapes on our hands. And we'd turn up with hangovers, and we'd have to work like facing each other for the next 10 hours.
Oh man.
And then the other ones in the factory knew that we'd been out and had a fight, and they'd stir it up. You know what I mean? And it was It was just rough, man. And then and I remember the one time the two of us had finished work and we were coming. He was driving this clapped out car that he had, and we had Radio 1 on, and Radiohead's Paranoid Android came on, and we didn't even know. We knew Radiohead, we liked them, but we didn't even know they had a new album coming out. And Paranoid Android came on. It was the first time that we heard it, and it just blew us away. We were like, this is amazing. It just sounded so fresh. Like, this is next level stuff, like proper rock opera being, and that's the kind of that's like the 90s vibe,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I still think that the reason why I bring Radiohead up is because I always think that, in a way, like Radiohead and those slew of albums, they were also kind of just ending pop music, like just breaking it all apart. Just like there's not really anywhere left to go with it now,
Now it comes the exhaustion afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, then it's like the exhaustion, and it's like it's got some things left in it as a form. And you don't know at the time. At the time, it seemed like really fresh, but at the same time, it's kind of like killing it. It's like it's using up what's left. It's using up the last of the tricks. That's the way I always looked at it, anyway.
And I think, like, as a whole, like the 90s were certainly like that. Like, as a core millennial, you always have like that nostalgia for my childhood. But I remember, like, that was similar to this one comment I read once where someone was like, in 93, I listened to, I think they said, yeah. In 93, they listened to Shara Brock on the radio by Smashing Pumpkins. And it's like, now everything's changed. Everything's like, the excess of the 80s is gone. Now it's something new. It's something different, something fresh. But I guess, like, we didn't, people didn't realize at the time, like, that the cultural blender could only go so far. And then, by the time you get to the 2000s, now you start to see, like, what Mark Fisher says. It's like, now it's like true postmodernism. Everything can come back. Everything can arise from the dead, and everything can cease to be. And it's like, there's no longer like a defining era to things. But yeah. I guess we were talking about the cultural immune system. Yeah, go ahead, Morgoth. Yeah.
I remember because I got into, I mean, in the late 90s it was quite wild. It was rough when I was growing up, I think you might tell, but I did get into quite a bit of trouble, and I ended up I started going backpacking, and then eventually I ended up in quite a bit of trouble because of a fight that I'd had with somebody, which didn't go well for him. But I'm not gonna be an internet tough guy, and I'm old now anyway. Yeah. But it was a bad situation. But I ended up going to living on the continent, working in the Dutch petrochemical industry for years, and so I kind of, it was weird because once that happened, I went over there, and I was there for like 12 years.
Oh man.
I came back from now and then, but what I'm getting at is that what that allowed me to do was to come back and see. I would come back once a year to England, so I was able to actually see things changing. Yeah. And I remember there was an American rock band called the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, and they had an album out in, I think, 2003 or something, and there was this absolute sort of banger anthem on it called "Whatever Happened to My Rock and Roll," and that really resonated with me, because by that time it was more like the good stuff was being phased out, and I just thought everything was getting kind of bland. But there was this one kind of rebellion, this last kind of kind of Gen X kind of middle finger to where things were going. This doomed roar by the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Whatever happened to my rock and roll? And that always stuck out with me, because then you got people like Keane coming in, and the Stereophonics had been around for longer, but then they became this big thing, and Muse, which I always thought was like a Radiohead ripoff. And
I never got into Muse. It kind of like, I tried, but I don't know, they got a weird,
it was like too much. It was like too hysterical and too screechy. It was like doing Tom York, but then more, which I thought was kind of weird. And so there was this that I caught wind of this creeping malaise, is another Pink Floyd lyric, earlier on at that time. And then on the political front as well, like the New Labour sort of thing came in as well, which he picked up on straight away. I remember the first time I ever heard the word multicultural was when Gordon Brown, I used to pick up the Times newspaper, and I would buy it would come out, I'd get the Sunday Times, but I'd have to get it on a Monday because I was in a different country. And I read an article and he was going on about multicultural Britain. And straight away I was like, what about our culture? We already had one. What's this about? And I knew, I just instinctively knew that it was something dodgy.
Yeah. It's that's sort of a, I don't know if you're a fan of like harder music, but it reminds me of like in the 90s in North America, like Pantera basically like kept metal alive. That's like
I love Pantera, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. But I'm a big I get so much crap for this, but because again, it's my childhood, but I was quite a fan of the early 2000s new metal. I feel like that was like sort of the peak, the last time you had like unabashedly, like let's face it was like white people music. But a lot of people, they're like, no, actually, like that was the beginning of the end. But I'm like, not really though, not really. Like if you look at like, for example, that documentary on Woodstock '99, how they did like this huge hit piece on it, and they're like, no, that like those are all the angry young white men that voted for Trump. And it's they did this huge hit piece on that Woodstock '99, and actually the real progressive multicultural thing was Coachella, because it started the same year. And it was like that dichotomy. I was like, I found that hilarious, because like Woodstock was the Chuds, there was like Chud music. It was like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and it's like the real progressive multiculturalism was Coachella, with all of their hyper pop bands. So it's like that same dichotomy is like any sort of like culture that the Chuds have is immediately like evil and coded in. There's this one point in the documentary where they're like, where did all those angry young white men that went around and burned things down and assaulted people, where did they go? Oh, they went on the internet, they went on 4chan, and then they voted for Trump. It's like Woodstock led to Gamergate, led to Trump. So it's like
I worked at a warehouse some years ago, and there was a young lad. I mean, that's a story as well, because I basically red pilled everybody in the warehouse. Like, I waged this. This is more recent. And it was a warehouse and had about 25 people in it, and they were mainly working class white lads. And the radio that they were listening to Capital FM, which is like just the worst kind of poppy
Capital FM.
They've only got like 8 songs, and then what I did, and by that time I was like aware of Kevin MacDonald's culture of critique and everything, and I waged this kind of campaign of hate where against the radio station. Because I understood the culture of critique. I understood there was this, if you kind of did just this incessant deconstruction of like the host culture, people would just stop believing in it. They just become demoralized.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, and I waged it. I waged this campaign of hate against the radio station. And what it was because all of the DJs would be gay, or it was Radio 1 as well by that time, and it was all like promoting like pop stars of color, especially rap, and I would be asking them, because they're all like rough white lads, and I was saying, like, what are you doing listening to this? Like, this is not for you. This is not your music. What are you? And I was going, all the DJs are gay. Like, what the hell is this? or all. I mean, I actually did a video on Ed Sheeran and what that related to this.
Oh, I watched that one. I remember that one. Yeah.
Why I hated Ed Sheeran. And this is where I perfected all of my takedowns of all of the music. And it was that Ed Sheeran is like he's kind of he doesn't really have any authenticity to him. What he's trying to do is kind of copy the authenticity that he knows sells music. So you get this kind of sort of second-hand fake kind of bland and vanilla-ness to it, which is awful.
It's purely mercenary, yeah.
Yeah, like I used to break it all down, and eventually they kind of joined in. They joined in on the kind of let's like dunk on the crap music, and then eventually I said, so why don't we just change a radio station over? And I says, you all hate it. You all complain about it day in, day out. And they were like, well, what are we going to put on? And so I put, at first I put Absolute 90s on, and then I put it on to classic rock. And I kind of liked it. So I just sort of, it stayed there. So everybody was like, running around in the warehouse, kind of rocking to Thin Lizzy and Whiskey in a Jar and all of this kind of thing. because they just didn't want to defend it anymore. But there was this, what I was leading to, there was this one young lad. There was one person of color there, and I don't like. I've got to be careful here, but
yeah,
basically, this person of color there, and then there was this young lad who was 18. He's really insecure, he's a spotty little kid, and he asked me where something was, and I said, like, why don't you go and ask the son of Africa? And he was just like, couldn't believe. Bear in mind at this time was the great meme war and the Trump thing going on the internet.
Oh man,
yeah. and he was like, and he burst out laughing, and he said, "You can't say that." I said, "Yes, I can." Say, what's the matter with you, man? I'll say what I want. You running around. You thought it was funny, didn't you? And he became like a sort of a buddy. Like a little Padawan that I like red pilled over the course of the next 18 months.
Took him under you.
Yeah, on everything. And he the spots went, and he got a girlfriend and everything. And anyway, I still see him from time to time. And last summer he came down. We had a few beers, and we came back. I brought him back to my place while his taxi came. And I put Pantera on, the Vulgar Display of Power album.
Oh yeah.
And there was something in it which just wiped him away straight away. It was, I saw him on his phone straight away, like kind of, what's this called? And he was making a note to come back to it later. So that there's something in Pantera, which that Vulgar Display of Power one, I would say, is the best, which instinctively hits young European fellas like.
Yeah, like I think Josh Neal and Jefferson Lee went into this. They had a stream about it, but it's true. Like it was like unabashedly European in a sense. It was sort of like not apologizing for who you are, but also like because of the so many influences that like Dimebag and Phil Anselmo had in terms of like American music, whether it be country or even like the previous iterations of metal. It was like also one of the few bands where they kept getting harder as they went along, but still maintaining a radio presence, which is like almost impossible nowadays. It's unheard of, right? Like, I mean, but they're also a mix of like technicality and musicianship, but also like the rhythm of it was very intense. It was, you could fill a whole stadium. It wasn't like a lot of like, music that I'm a fan of in metal, which is kind of like, a nerd fest, like Prog Death or whatever. Like it didn't scare the normies, but it still had like enough musicianship to be like god tier among metalheads and metal elitists. So it's like, yeah.
And what it lacked as well was that there's a lot of the heavy metal. There's a sort of campy aspect to it.
It had no camp. Yeah,
there was no kind of like Eddie the Skeleton running around on the stage and all of this kind of
thing.
Or
like cartoonish death metal lyrics,
Yeah, there was none of that. It seemed much more raw and real and political.
Yeah, it wasn't like Glenn Benton going around talking about, no diss to deicide, but I mean, the whole Satan worship thing is kind of like
I
it was
mean,
passe even back then in like '95. Yeah.
like we used to get stoned and put Iron Maiden on, and when we were out in the car, and we're going way back when I was a young fella, and we used to laugh at the lyrics because they had like Iron Maiden would have like a 12-minute song, and it would be like the story of Alexander the Great, and you
Yeah.
think. And it's just like, what a weird subject. Like a 12-minute rock opera about Alexander the Great. I mean, it's okay, it's kind of it's kind of weird, but it's kind of cringe as well at the same time. And we'd be kind of stoned just laughing at it, thinking, what are they thinking? Who are songs about like Spitfire pilots in World War II, Aces High, and all of this kind of thing. And you just think, well, it is kind of naff, this, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, yeah, it is. It's like power metal. It's like, well, power metal is more like that. Yeah, a lot of it can descend into like cringe territory. It's like, songs about wizards and dragons, and it's like, ugh, like. But then Iron Man, like they're different because it's funny, like they were like they have an awareness of their history. You know what I mean? And like, so songs like that do come off as like kind of campy, but then you appreciate them. It's kind of like Sabaton. Like, I'm not a big fan of like the theatrics of it, but then like the meat and the history of it, it's like you can understand. It's very different.
I will say as well that like from in the context of today's culture, like
Yeah.
to have a poke at Iron Maiden there. Like, I feel guilty about saying that straight
Yeah,
away.
because in comparison.
Because and it speaks to the sort of like how sort of self-indulgent and pampered we were and spoiled for choice in the 90s, where
Yeah.
when you've got like explicitly sort of white masculine men who are very good at playing instruments, they can write a hell of a tune, and then you're still gonna giggle and snark at that,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
how dare you, and yeah, it's that's the 90s for you, actually, because you can they were great musicians and the songs are terrific, but you're gonna be such a little shit that you're gonna like giggle, like smoke a spliff and giggle because they're singing about Alexander the Great,
Yeah.
who was himself like a total chad. Like, what are you thinking? You know what I mean?
The first chat of history, really.
Yeah.
No, that's what I mean. Like, it's yeah, it's like sort of, oh, this isn't sophisticated enough. But then it's like that. Sometimes you have to embrace it. Like, you can't, like, see, it's like me with new metal, right? Just embrace it. Like, you can't, it's going to be like, oh, that's not sophisticated enough. It's like, I remember that one video, or I think you were on a live stream, and I don't know why I turned to my I was talking about this with my good friend Matthew the Stout, who's an amazing artist himself, and we were talking about we were talking, and I remember the one stream you did, you had this line where, like, the way you said it in your like thick accent, where you're like, is this all that we are now? Is that basically Stormzy in the National Gallery? I'm like, oh my god, like that's like Stormzy occupied Britain is like the future now. I'm like, oh my god, it's tragic, but it was funny when you said it. Like, is that all we have now? Is Stormzy?
I got in big trouble with it. That the Stormzy saga, like,
Yeah.
if you want, that's part of the Morgoth sort of pantheon. And I was in the newspapers for that as well. Like, the Independent ran stories on me video and everything.
Oh my god, that's
It
right. Yeah,
it was insane. It was totally insane because, I mean, what happened was that in Britain we've got this big kind of festival, Glastonbury.
yeah,
Which
Glastonbury.
is,
Yeah,
which is all. I mean, again, like back in the 90s, it did have a kind of authenticity to it, and you're standing in the fields, and you'd have bands like Oasis and Pulp and all of the Britpop scene, and
yeah.
okay, whatever. But then, like,
Did you ever go to Donington? Did you ever
no, I never.
download?
I haven't been to many pop gigs. I did actually see Pulp live. I saw the Prodigy live as well. That was
Oh,
great.
nice.
The
Oh.
Prodigy was that. The Prodigy was another thing. But the Stormzy thing was that it was like he that's what it was, and I think this was in 2018. It was on Glastonbury, and he did like he went on with a stab vest. And so, if in what it is the urban youth, let's say in London, they've got these. We don't have so many guns, but what they do is stab each other. So stabbing is this
Yeah, the
huge thing in London.
shankings. Yeah.
And Stormzy did this whole sort of. It was kind of like a sort of a George Floyd type thing before George Floyd, about nobody cares about all the urban youth and what's happening here. And he had a stab vest on, and it was everybody was going on about it the next. Oh, he's so brave. He's so it's so he's out there. This is the next level. And Jeremy Corbyn went on the stage and gave him a hug. And I felt. I mean, I put this on Twitter the other day. Like, you know, Oscar Wilde, when he finished reading the Old Curiosity Shop, where the little Nell dies. And I read the book. I couldn't believe it. And there's like 25 pages of kind of mawkish sentimentality because the little girl died. And Oscar Wilde read it, and his review, he said, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to burst out laughing at the death of little Nell. It was just so.
Oh man!
And that was kind of my general attitude to the new Stormzy kind of.
It's kitsch, just political kitsch. It's fake emotion, in other words.
Yeah, and so I did a video saying, like, it was in me old videos when there wasn't as much censorship on YouTube.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Basically, I did a video which was ranty and sweary. I says he was a talentless twat. I says the only reason why we're all hearing about him. I think that was actually the title of the video was Stormzy is a talentless tool of the system. And
I think I watched this back in the day.
Yeah. And my whole point was that all of the press, all of the newspapers, everybody is on his side. Like he's not any kind of rebel.
He's not an edgy outsider rebel.
No, he's not. This is all fake. This is not rebellion. This is total astroturf. The power structure wants him there, and somehow it hit some kind of algorithm thing. And it got like 35,000 views in like a single day, and it just kept going up and up.
Which back then was like, that was incredible.
And at the time, I would have only had about 9,000 subs. And there's a lefty pop singer over here called Billy Bragg, and he.
Oh yes, I've heard of this character. Yeah,
and he picked it up and put it out on Twitter, and there was this huge thing began to go on about like there's this racist YouTuber and he's disrespecting Stormzy, and this is and what happened next was that my video saying like this is all nonsense. There's a context, because at that time Morrissey had come out and said some pretty edgy things about immigration and political.
And he supported Brexit, yeah.
And I mentioned Morrissey. I asked in the video, like, why, like, Morrissey is actually, like, he deserves this, Stormzy doesn't. Why is it that one gets this kind of attention and this celebration, and the other one's just is like hated?
And that's like red meat for the British media. Like, that's man.
And so then the video ended up on Morrissey's public website. and so then what happened was that and then it went nuts. And then happened? And then the independent newspaper came out with a second piece, and it was like Morrissey hosts far-right racist YouTuber on his website.
How are you not doxxed though? Like, what happened with that? It went nowhere? I'm assuming.
With like what?
When the Independent went after you, like, how are you not? Like, how did you? How did they not like really they were trying to go after you, if I recall.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, they
like
were. They just couldn't get me. They put a call out.
to the activists, that's how it works. And
Yeah, but I mean, I live in the northeast on like a pretty rundown area. I'm not going to parties in London. I don't do real life stuff, so
yeah,
they don't really have much to go on. But so yeah, so that happened, and then like it was really funny because then like Billy Bragg, he was kind of leading the charge against me, my kind of criticism of Stormzy and defense of Morrissey, and Billy Bragg ended up like slipping into the like atting Morrissey on Twitter, like saying like, look, love you guy, we know we've got different opinions, but just want to say like you need to get this racist off your website. Like this is and
oh my god.
as far as I know, the video is still there to this day. But I had to I eventually I did kind of lose my bottle, and I had to take it off YouTube, but it's still up on like the other ones, Odyssey and BitChute and whatnot. And then I did a second video, which I called the good, the brag, and the ugly. Oh, the good, the good, the good, the brag, and the Stormzy, where I kind of detailed it out, and it was really a kind of it was really just squarely aimed at Billy Bragg and how like this was in the days when I would like have 5 bullet points for the videos and just like riff and rant all the way through it, and
Yeah.
and so that was the second one, where I was basically saying like, you're just a shill, Billy Bragg. You're not helping the little man out. You're on the side of the machine.
Yeah, and for like for like a outsider pop star like him, that's like that's it's like saying that, well, you're really just a labor voter at the end of the day. Like that's that's crazy, man. Like the British media is like absolutely insane when it comes to that stuff. I remember, what was that the one line, it was so funny. Like it's funny in hindsight, but at the time it was terrible. What do they call millennial woes? The Independent, vile vlogger.
The vile vlogger, yeah.
But the way he said it was like, they called me a vile vlogger. Like,
and there's like you'll notice as well that they always use. I mean, they don't have they'll get me in the end. They will.
Yeah.
They will get me in the end. I'm just not going to make it easy for them. I mean, I don't even know. I'm not really edgy these days. I don't know.
No.
I'm still in Hope Not Hate report every year. Like, but what it's funny because they always use like the same photos for people. So if they're going to report on Mark Collett, like it will absolutely be the one where he's standing with that like really tall girl with a sweater on her neck. If you've seen that,
yeah, the one with the tattoos and everything. It would be, yeah, it's always that one.
And Millennial Wars, there's one where
he's standing in front. He's like answering the door. He's got the stain on his shirt.
Yeah. There's
oh my god,
like a vacant look on his face, and then there's another one where it's I think he was at Cologne or somewhere, and it's taken from a bad angle, and he was clean.
Yeah, the speech, the Cologne speech.
So he has that kind of baby's bum look, and it's taken from, so they'll always use like
the worst photo,
and they even do it with Laura Towler. Like there's, because it's pretty bad. It's not easy to make Laura Towler look bad.
Yeah.
But they did it. Like they've cut it where she was about to give a speech and it was at a sort of wrong angle, and she was looking up towards the microphone as if like she didn't know what she was doing, and she looks all awkward. So even then, like even when they'll still like get you, and it's pathetic. I hate them.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's well, like even like Mark Collette, he hasn't got a bad angle. He's pretty good looking guy. But it was just that one photo was like, an optical, to say the least. But they'll always use that one. With Woes, they'll always use like the one where they're like confronting him in front of his door. That was, but in hindsight though, it is kind of like hilarious because the British media, like I noticed they are like I want to go back to like the Little Englander thing, but like the British media, they are like absolutely insane. Like especially if you follow the war closely. Like what was the story the other week that um Wagner, they're fighting with they're fighting with 20th century shovels, tack shovels. Like they're using Mosin Nagants, like they'll come out with like these insane stories. But like I guess like the British media, they do have like that reputation of like sensationalism that I guess
Mm.
just like carried over from like an older time, like a tabloid, you know, 20th century in Britain. It's like it's kind of funny that way. Like they have like a particular sensibility that is ranges from like mildly humorous and witty to like absolutely deranged. Yeah.
And you can see there's a kind of still today there's a sort of reflection of the class system in like the
Oh yeah,
tabloids. So,
definitely.
so
Yeah.
you get, I mean, for what they call the kind of the kind of Middle England footy fan, like once stop the boats, North FC kind of meme. They get the red top tabloids, and it's like written to like the level of like an 8-year-old boy or something. It's just
Oh man.
humiliation. It's just pure humiliation when you look at how simplistic and dumb the way it's written. It's really, I mean, and I still see people, you still see people like in the morning, I'll be walking the dog and you'll see some fella like popping out and he's coming out and he's got like stop the boats. And what was the other these memes they come out with? That what
Yeah.
like when Rishi Sunak, I mean, he wasn't even, he the meme for him was, "Are you ready for Rishi?" And it was just so, you think, oh, who thought of that? Are you are you ready for Rishi?
Yeah, or they'll have like references to like old 90s pop songs. Like do you know the one account on Twitter? Oh, what's his name? I'll look it up, but he was having this like he does these spoof edits, right? And one of them was like Boris Johnson, should he stay or should he go, live at the Mallard? It's like, and then you actually look at the real Mallard website, it's like literally like 10 different articles about Boris Johnson and his big decision, but it's all like referencing like older pop songs. It's like that it's like particular like Brit popper core. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
they even did that thing with the Manchester Arena bombing. I did a video on it where, like, though that wasn't so much the tabloid press would have been in on it, but it was the nudge departments and the whole "don't look back in anger" thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all of that, like if a bomb went off on King's Cross, the line, like now at rush hour or whatever, there's an entire department in the British government who's already like workshopped and gamed out how the reactions to that. Like, so
Yeah.
if it was an Islamic extremist who did it, then they've got one kind of way to mold it and manipulate it and manipulate the public masses and how they conceptualize it. And if it was like a far right terrorist or something, then they've got their own version of that. And if it was like some rando, they've got another one for that. And it's like, I spoke about this. I got into this a lot on me Substack last year. I learned the term from Andy Nowicki. This high strangeness of where because you're being manipulated all of the time, that
Yeah.
you're kind of, you're not too sure if anything is part of the psyop, or like it's like I was saying on AA's last week, where like a week ago, last Monday,
Yeah.
all of the with the asylum seekers coming to the south coast, like within a day, everybody in the media and all of the politicians started referring to asylum seekers as small boats. And it was just so sudden and so out of the blue. Like all of it, everybody all at once. as if they'd got a memo. Like on Monday, we begin with we drop the term the new framing, because it sounds sort of safe. People, it doesn't scare people, and we're going to start and call them small boats. That's how we refer to all of this, and then it just gets normalized and becomes part of the general conversation. But then so what happens is you get people who are they're kind of, like I said, it's as if like on the Matrix where the cat walks past the doorway twice, and you think, well, did we always like use the term small boats like
Yeah,
this?
yeah, because they ignore the sort of prior history of it. They speak as if you've been using it for years to like manifest that doubt. You tweeted about this. You said I was listening to it. I believe you're actually with Prude in that one. That stream. And I remember you tweeted about that, and I replied with some of these new lingo terms. They rediscovered the 90s term carceral, the left. They've rediscovered the term third place. Not third position, but you know what a third place is, Morgoth?
I looked at. I remember you explain it, because I looked it up, but it slipped my mind.
A third place is essentially, from my recollection, a lot of like, a sociological term for a place that isn't exactly it defies the public and private distinction. It's not exactly a home, but it's a public space that is coded as being more communal. So like a church courtyard, a basketball courtyard, like anything where like there was like one leftoid, I believe, with pronouns in the bio, with the flag, the particular flag, saying like the reason that British kids stab each other is because they have no third places. They have no third places where they could go after school. It's sort of like more money for the programs, more money for the basketball courts. That's what the third place is. And of course, they're rediscovering the carceral thing because everything's carceral now. Carceral Capitalism, which actually, that is actually a good book. I do recommend that book, Carceral Capitalism. But the leftoid, they'll take like these Baroque, they'll take the like Baroque academic terms and they'll like pretend that it's always in public discourse, but they'll switch the memo, like the whole, like the remember the happening was a month ago was the gas stove thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like gas stoves are going to like end civilization. Now it's like the carceralism of YouTubers like you talking about, or the carceralism of Ron DeSantis banning trans literature in public schools. But yeah, finish your point, Morgoth. You were going somewhere with it.
It's this because then if you bring it up to somebody, and you say, like, just say using the small boats thing as an example, and you say, well, like we didn't always just refer to asylum seekers as small boats. Like something's happened, something's changed, and then the obvious response is like, what? So like, do you think there's somebody like pressing a button, and then everybody in the media and the politicians just suddenly start talking in a different way? And if you say, well, it seems like that, but you sound paranoid. And another thing is, like, for a lot of people, I will just say this kind of thing because I've got a way of expressing myself, which is like, if I get it wrong, I can kind of just say, oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah. But for a lot of people, they're kind of hesitant. Then they think, well, is it just me? And am I going mad? Is it? And I think that's what I'll pick up on something like that and just like throw it right out in the open and make fun of it. And it's like, well, it's small boats. Like all of a sudden, this is just like the new thing that everybody's referring to. But for so many people, I think it's there like half in and half out of their conscious.
Yeah.
And what that does is give you this kind of feeling of disconnect. Like Andy Nowicki was saying on the High Strangers thing, where there's this kind of feeling that the picture on the wall is hanging a little bit slighted, but you cannot really tell. You're not sure. or if it's always been like that, and I think this is a thing with the culture in general. I mean, I'd love to know what's happening with that mushroom cloud that went off in Ohio. Like we just that was like what 2 weeks ago, and
it's gone. Yeah,
it's gone. Like what? So what's happened? Is there chemicals in the water supply? What happened with that?
I guess, but the news cycle determines reality, so that's not there anymore. So it's like the physical, you know what I mean? It is sort of like a political surrealism in the sense of like something can appear as a news story, then it can go away. Really, the last 2 years with the pandemic, like especially here in Canada, like that was like the sort of apex of it, because now all of a sudden people were just expected to know very medicalized terms that were in public. It's like, oh, we always, lockdowns and flattening the curve and all that. That was always in public discourse. What are you talking about? Like, take your meds, go and touch grass. If you, if you didn't go along with it, there is a sort of surrealistic element to the propaganda because of the sort of, I feel it's because of the sort of, how shall I put it? The conviction by which they say these terms, the conviction by which they believe that we were always like this, we always believed this, and if you don't believe it, then you're crazy, right? Because these things were percolating in academic discourse for a while, and then they sort of diffused onto like chattering class discourse, and then all of a sudden one day, every single news anchor, every single hack writer, they all of a sudden believe in the same thing now. It's like, it's very strange how that works.
And in Britain, we know that the government are doing this because it's on their websites. There's the perception management, applied psychology, and nudge units. And so something changes slightly or something happens, and you've got to second guess it, because you've got to think, well, okay, is this actually just a story, or is there something more behind it? And there's almost always more behind it. I mean, just this week, I swore that I wouldn't get involved with the Gary Lineker thing, because
I was going to ask you. I was afraid to ask you because you were saying, I don't want to talk about this. This is what is this thing? What is this thing? The Gary Lineker what's his name? Lineker?
Yeah, well, this is what sparked the entire sort of mid-century Germans or left-wing kind of discourse where we began, because so Gary Lineker is a football. He used to be a footballer, and now he runs presents the BBC One flagship show, Match of the Day, with a bunch of other like big name ex-footballers. And he's also like the most like howl at the moon raging shitlib in the country. And he said the latest plan to stop the small boats would be, I mean, see how you get lost in he said the latest plan. This is the thing with Britain. It's like layers and layers of like manipulation. So Gary Lineker said that the government's new plan to stop the small boats was like something from like mid-century German ideology.
Yeah.
And this, for some reason, like this led to some huge backlash where the right tried to cancel him. And it was all just, I knew it wouldn't work because he, in the end, is in agreement with the power structure. Yeah. And the whole kind of framing, I just thought it was all cringe.
It's a typical like conservatard trying to like cancel a leftist by saying, "Oh, you're a hypocrite," or like how dare you say that? Yeah. Never
because it does happen. It does happen where people get cancelled for like wrongly invoking the mid-century Germans.
Yeah.
It happened to Andrew Bridgen on the certain medical procedures a while ago. He actually did get cancelled hard, and he was a Tory politician.
Oh yeah.
But then you can see it's because he is actually going against the grain of the power structure. But I've kind of invented a new sort of term that I'm gonna like write a memo on and come back to this and explore, which is what I'm thinking of as libtard plot armor. Because there's like
Oh,
Because in the narrative that of like Western liberal democracy and its value set, when you are a libtard like Gary Lineker, they say these things and the right tries to cancel them, and
but they're
in this
never going to really
case,
get canceled. Yeah.
no, he was suspended from his program for like 2 days, and he's going to go back and all of this. And I knew that would happen, which is why I didn't get invested in it. I didn't get excited because I knew that would happen, because I know that Gary Lineker has libtard plot armor, and the libtard plot armor. Like if you look at like Movie Critic YouTube, and they so in like say the last season of Game of Thrones, like Arya Stark or Jon Snow has ridiculous amounts of plot armor, where what happens is they get themselves into all of these dangerous situations.
But they're never going to really die.
Yeah. Which is like the opposite of how Game of Thrones started. In the earlier days, it was exciting because like anybody could die, and they threw
Ned
their
Stark
own
could
rules.
die.
Yeah, everybody could die. So you were always thinking, oh God, you're always excited. When you get to the when drama's badly written, the characters have plot armor because the person sort of writing the storyline and writing the narrative, they can't allow for that person to die because they need them for the main narrative, the main plot. And it's the same with like a libtard, where they get themselves into like scrapes, and you can't invest in it. You can't invest in it. It's the same as when somebody like Voucher's being cancelled on Twitter.
Oh
Like
or Natalie being canceled.
he's got plot armor as well. Like they're not gonna get like the Ned Stark treatment, or the Andrew Bridgen treatment where he's just like unpersoned completely and left to rot, because they aren't allotted the plot armor, whereas the libtards are, and it makes them. It means they're immune, but it also means when a story unfolds involving them, it's kind of boring and pointless to get wrapped up in at the same time, because you know that's not going to happen. The bullet is always going to go in their shoulder. It's that kind of thing. And so
they had a secret vest on. Yeah,
they had a secret vest on. They've got mithril on or something. So it's kind of. It's just boring to get involved with these things.
So you didn't get all riled up by this by this Gary situation, because you knew like he's never going to be big. But why are people obsessed with it? The British like British conservative or right wing circles, there seems to be obsessed with this guy.
I don't know. I don't know why anybody got involved with it, because part of it is like the sort of the starting point of it, where these new laws against the small boats, which will never amount to anything anyway. Like you can't say that is.
I was going to ask you: is Sunak based now? Is he going to be like Krishna and say Namaste before he redacts a million small boats?
No,
is Sunak going to read Sestri Devi and never mind, I'm going too far with that. Will there be Hyperborean edits of Sunak now?
Yeah, well, this is the joke that the stupidest made. Like, congratulations, you've finally got your pagan. Well done, pagan bros. You've finally got one of your guys running the UK.
That's hilarious, though. Like Sunak becomes an esoteric Austrian painter because he read Sestri Devi, and he's awakening the spirit of Lord Krishna now.
I wouldn't mind it if he did that. If he became like this kind of, how like the Dalai Lama comes out with things that are
are like turbo based,
like I'd actually prefer it if Rishi Sunak came out as this kind of, like the elephant with all the arms, and he had like the dot on his forehead, and he's just going like super kind of some kind of hardcore Hindu kind of traditionalist mindset.
He starts doing a Shiva dance in the middle of Parliament.
That would be better, but he's just like a boring banker's bitch at the end of the day. I'd like him to go like full sort of based Hindu, but there's no chance of it.
I know it's not an original take, but the problem with Sunak is like he seems like a nice guy. Like he you know what I mean? Not to insult him, but he doesn't look like, and it's not that he's, of course it's not because he's Indian, but the personality, like, and you could say the same about Liz Truss. I had this joke I sent to AA at the time. I said, if Tory boys, if they really wanted to meme their thing, they could say Liz Truss the plan. That could have been something, but not to insult him. It's nothing to do with his race or whatever. But it seems that like Sunak doesn't look like a leader. He looks like a bureaucrat. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have the oomph of like, say what you want about Boris Johnson, but like he's evil and all that. But like he looked like, I mean, he looked like a goofball, but like he looked like he could be a leader. You know what I mean? Like he was the leader. You know,
Boris Johnson was channeling that sort of bulldog nationalist energy.
He wanted to be Churchill.
Yeah. So he was tapping into that consciously and knowingly. You can see it even the way he walked. If you look, especially during the pandemic, like if you look at the old video footage of Churchill in his boiler suit, like in the North African desert and all of this, he had a certain kind of way of walking, which was sort of kind of hunched over and like just to business. And Boris Johnson copied that way of like exactly that way of walking that Churchill was doing there, and this sort of slightly bumbling and kind of goofy kind of mannerisms as well. But there was something. There was there was a steeliness to Churchill which Boris Johnson couldn't replicate, which he didn't.
No, never. No,
there was like what obviously Winston Churchill is not particularly popular in our circles,
of course.
But there was like a seriousness to the man, which Boris cannot replicate.
Yeah, he had no seriousness, but he did have that air of being like the head of the Tory party. Like where Sunak, he does suffer from the fact that he looks like a very typical like bureaucrat or backbencher. Like he doesn't. Yeah. But you know what's funny about the plot armor thing? You like that term is so great because a good example would, like, one of the best examples, and this is another thing in my neck of the woods why I never got excited over it the way that like these like normie conservatives did, was the recent inquiry about the truckers. And I like, here's the thing. People were like, oh, well, Trudeau looks weak and we're going to get him now. You know, he's going to, don't worry, Pierre Palaver is going to topple him. I go, listen, nothing's going to happen by the inquiry. Because, I mean, you don't have to like read de Juvenal. You don't have to read Mosca. You don't have to read whoever to know that you're basically, the power structure isn't going to hand Trudeau an L by saying like, oh, well, he invoked, he really abused his power during the time. I go, no, are you like kidding me? No one's going to give Trudeau a slap on the wrist and say, oh, well, he shouldn't have invoked the Emergencies Act. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, it's because the judge himself was like a Liberal Party hack that was there since his father was there, or should I say his stepfather? But like it's, because Trudeau has Liberal plot armor. You know what I mean? He's not gonna. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And you saw it on a grander scale because the other story that came out, which was my last Substack article, is on the WhatsApp leaks that came out, and you can see clearly that, and I think that's in the end why the globalists wanted rid of Boris Johnson. People say he'll come back. I'm not too sure.
No,
but you can see in all of the messages that he is a doubter. He's saying, like, there's messages like where he's talking with other politicians, and there's 100,000 messages leaked. We've only seen the ones with like British politicians, which is kind of what I got into on the article. But like Boris Johnson's saying things like, so let me run these maths by you then, Chris, because Chris Whitty was the science officer or whatever. And he was like, I'm looking at the numbers here, and basically the only people who are vulnerable are very old people. And even then, like it's about as dangerous as them falling down the stairs. Like that levels it out. And I'm struggling to understand why these extreme policies are being proposed when for this risk. It just seems ridiculous. And it carried on like that. There was a lot of them, but yet it all happened, and it happened. It seemed this is a weird thing because it happened like around this time. It happened on this day in 3 years ago in March. And it seems like the end of January, early March. If you want to be, let's just put the tinfoil hat on. Let's just do it. But it seems like the annual PSYOP begins like sort of late February, early March.
It's not the October surprise; it's the February surprise.
Yeah, you know that meeting where it's like Klaus Schwab spinning a wheel for what disaster we get this year. And
it'll be climate lockdowns next year.
Yeah, climate lockdowns. What was it? The cyber attacks, banking crash.
Oh yeah, apparently did the sky fall today at the time of recording this broadcast? Did the sky fall today with the Silicon Valley banks, or what's apparently the government shielding them now?
I saw a tweet from I went into that Twitter Spaces thing. I saw you were
I saw.
I kind of had it on in the background. And there was like, it was all the banks in America, some on the West Coast, they'll still be open, I think. It's
see nothing happening.
There was a lot of stuff coming through about local banks are really struggling with this. But I haven't even had time to like find out what the official narrative is, let alone like indulgence in conspiracy.
There were tweets that like, how dare you people cheer on the downfall of these Silicon Valley companies and these banks? Don't you know these hardworking bureaucrats and tech people? Like it's so ridiculous. Like
and it's kind of like we've now finally arrived at the grand arc of like the left being cooked. Yeah. Where it's like we now expect the left to come out and defend like central banks. Like you know that the people argue about it, but this idea that the reason we've got woke was because of it began with Occupy Wall Street, and there's people
woke capital.
People go backwards and forwards and argue about that, but I mean, it's still going to be the case that like what are they going to say? Are they like left wing, like the sort of lefty influencers who've gone along with all of the rest? Can they now be psyoped into like defending bank bailouts now?
Oh yeah, they are. No, I'll tell you why. Because there's this tweet where they said this. What's it called? SVB? Is that the bank?
It's Silicon Valley Bank, so it's SVB. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, there was this tweet by some journalist saying that SVB was a big funder in like trans and LGBTQIA and other like activist organizations and Planned Parenthood. And so they're going to be like, the banks actually benefit left-wing causes. And apparently they were also allegedly giving money to activist groups that then whittled down to the anti-you-know-what. So yeah, they're going to say that banks are woke and therefore we have to defend them now.
And originally the cope was that all these corporations are going woke because they're co-opting like left-wing causes because
it says PR. It's cynical.
Yeah, it's cynical PR. Well, okay, so what are you going to do now? Because if it's just cynical PR and now they're going to go under, that's good then, isn't it?
Yeah, but right. So now the real activism can shine to the top.
Yeah, but no, they're gonna defend the bankers. That's where the left are.
Oh my god!
I kind of I cannot believe it. I can't believe where we are. And we're going to be, I mean, Ann Coulter retweeted my hot take, which was buckle up, boys. It's about to be misinformation and far-right racism to oppose bank bailouts. And of course, it was one of them things where I knew as soon as I tweeted it, people are replying saying, well, Morgoth, it always was racist to oppose the central bankers. You should know that.
Oh my god!
And I was like, oh, why isn't there an edit function on there? Yeah, you bastards! I knew it was coming.
Yeah, of course. So, like some frog was going to reply to you with that, of course. No, I feel my hot take is that really Gamergate brought us all here in terms of woke capitalism, because that really did expose the coordinated effort by various corporations. So actually, Sargon really exposed. All things lead to Sargon. Really, Sargon exposed woke capitalism more than anything with Gamergate. It's funny because a lot of these anime racists, they the Zoomers, they have these memes about it where actually Gamergate was more important than 9/11 in terms of like disrupting the flow of the end of history. But you could like almost make a case for that, where like Gamergate did like take on this, at least to the journalists, it took on like this cosmic significance of right-wing hate that like really Gamergate was like year zero, that there was this direct line from Gamergate to Trump that really like started it all. But yeah, so we can thank our good friend Carl Benjamin for this.
Yeah, I do think there was a direct link to Trump from that, like that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That whole era.
They're not totally wrong when they say that. It is true. Like
yeah, there is something to that. That's definitely and along with a kind of relatively unregulated internet, which they've subsequently solved.
But also like a new way of like sort of, you could call it like a right-wing avant-garde that really, like in terms of engineering culture war discourse towards our favor, like that really did lead the way. I think like even the people at the time, like whatever you want to say about those, crop of like alt-like grifters, maybe they didn't even realize it themselves, but they were sort of like carving a path towards it's something my friend Adam Wallace said at the time. He wrote an article called The Chanternative Right, which was about like sort of weaponizing an avant-garde against the establishment in a very like different way that only like the terminally online could like really understand. And like a lot of my writing comes back at this as well, right? So
I mean, I remember on the original Morgoth review blog, way back in, and I've mentioned this before as well, as I've been like sort of wandering the internet, but because I used to I don't like bring it up much these days, but I actually used to write for the Daily Stormer.
Yeah.
Oh, and man. the I remember writing, I think I was in maybe 2017 or earlier, called The Meta Politics of the Great Shutdown, because it seemed to me that if we were right in our analysis, then they would have to shut everything down.
Yeah.
Because they just, and this is, I hadn't read Juvenal or Schmidt or anything. It just seemed like common sense. A lot of this stuff's just common sense, that if you're like sort of naturally cynical, I suppose the sort of the Gen X kind of 90s cynicism sticks with you. And it stands to reason that if you are correct in your analysis of things, then the power structure can't let it go on. It was wild. It was a wild time, and indeed it all got shut down.
Well, we always look back on it with a fondness, and I wanted to ask you this originally about coming back to Twitter. But before I get disrupted, I was referring to my friend on Twitter. I'm going to at you actually on this thread. Do you know Kunli Drukpa on Twitter?
No, I don't know many people on Twitter except for.
I'll at you. Like he does these edits. They're like phenomenal, and he's British, and it's like phenomenal the stuff he does. So I'm going to at you in this one thread where he goes, Britain during World War II, if the Allies fought for the values the people today pretend they did, London skyline, and he does this like little video, but then he does like this Churchill edit where it says Churchill's message: we shall import them onto the beaches, we shall import them onto the land grounds, we shall import them into the fields and import them onto the streets, we shall import them into the hills, we shall never stop importing. importing the little boats. But no, we always look back on it with like a fondness. And now that like some of the old hats, like the old hats are coming back because of Musk. Not all of them, of course. But I feel like we always go back to this nostalgia for 2016 because it truly was kind of like our avant-garde moment, our Woodstock. But at the same time, I remember reading this 4chan thread. I was going through my old caps before we recorded from my old computer. And it said, there was this one person on 4chan that said, you know, there's a sign of brittleness where by just shit posting, the regime has to act in like these incredibly insane, shut it all down sort of ways. And I'm thinking like, as much as we talk about how the regime itself has an incredible staying power, like it has an ability to sort of test resistances and absorb them. There still is at the one end, as they've never been more powerful than ever in terms of like cultural discourse and managing the message. There still is a brittleness to it. There still is like the fact that like they have to respond in like incredibly ridiculous ways because someone made a joke on the internet. And it's like I wonder like what the dichotomy will lead to in the future. Will sort of like whatever you want to call it, the global regime, will it lead to sort of uh, will they increase in their power, or will it be the case that as time goes on, as they expose themselves by having to act in more ridiculous and unhinged ways, will it be true that maybe just by posting, just by the frogs creating like this avant-garde on the internet, that will lead to like real world change? Or maybe we're just like overestimating our importance? Like, what do you think about this, like from your perspective?
I've got a bit of a bleak perspective because I see censorship coming of a magnitude which is much, much different from your losing a Twitter account or a YouTube channel. And I mean, like the stuff, we've got the online harms bill coming. It's working its way through Parliament, and there'll be the equivalent of something like that. Probably, certainly in Canada, it probably already is in place in somewhere like Germany. And I don't know. Because what they're going to do is fine platforms. So if somebody puts something too spicy up on Odyssey, say BitChute was the test case for this. It gets to the point where you think I don't know how much longer we can go, but one of the things that we have learned, which I think's been interesting, which is why we could survive yet, is it, and not everybody, I think not everybody caught on to this, which was that how you frame things and how you put things across cleverly. So, for example, we use something like the mid-century Germans.
I like the Austrian painter. Yeah,
Austrian painter. We'll talk about the urban youth. But and in like 2016, that era, the content creator was under massive amounts of pressure to go there, to say explicitly something which would get you destroyed. I mean,
it still happens to this day, by the way. There's like Telegram ghettos that still like edge post. Yeah.
And I remember distributors did a video on this called "How the Super Chat Killed Outright," and it was because when people started live streaming more, they were getting into they were being given super chats, GF for example, to like say he has $5, like say this, and then then you had to say it, and what you were doing was kind of it was sort of toxifying yourself. And then giving people justification to get censored, and there's certain parts of the E-right, as you say, like who still don't seem to have cottoned onto that, and it's still you've got to be edgy, you've got to constantly name them,
you have to name them,
and one of the reasons why I think that's kind of done with now is because everybody knows. Like I'll listen to Critical Drinker and Nerderotic and Mauler, and these people sometimes, catch up on what Nerd YouTube are talking about.
Yeah.
And they will be naming them in a kind of ironic and jokey way, and everybody laughs because everybody knows what they mean. And the idea back in 2016 was to red pill as many normies as we can. Now, in fact, that really boiled down to people who are on the internet a lot.
Yes.
So, and in that way, we did it. Like, that is kind
of...
Yeah,
the alt-right may have died, but the sort of ideas have percolated to, like, even the semi-mainstream. Like, who would have thought that Fox News people would be talking about demographics and how capitalism is actually deracinating us? Yeah, like, I remember hearing, like, Laura Ingraham talk about how capitalism destroys family values. I'm like, wow, that would have never happened 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was if you see it like the alt-right as being this kind of side run.
Yeah.
You know, like
they
that.
Immolated themselves so we could all walk. Yeah.
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 It's like that Urukai on Battle of Helm's Deep, where he's running with the bomb to the, and there's people, and then he's getting shot full of arrows, but he gets to the target and blows the wall apart. So that's kind of like what happened to the alt-right, but the wall came down regardless.
Yeah.
And so now, because of that, take a bow.
There are people that still believe that, like, Lauren Southern sunk a migrant boat. People that, like, believe stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah, so take a bow, gentlemen. Like, in many ways, for the people that we could reach with the message, it was kind of achieved. The wall did break, because now you can we use these terms. We don't have to be as explicit as what we once did, because we don't have to be, because everybody picks up on it and everybody knows.
Yeah.
So everybody knows. What that's actually worse for the regime, because it's a sort of double think. It's like a double speak, which is set in, where you used to have like the crazy. It was like this shock,
like
therapy.
Cartoonish, like American History X, The Believer type, like white nationalism 1.0, as people say in our spaces.
Yeah. And it was and kind of taking ownership of that. The curb stomp scene, like turning that into a meme, which is like you take
the Hyperborean edits. Yeah.
You own it, and it's like, yeah, it's like
oh man.
And so that kind of was done. But it didn't. It led to a kind of a paranoia, but it also led to where everybody can pick up on what you're saying. And that was the work that was achieved with the alt-right, I think.
Yeah, for that we can thank them, but then other things maybe not so much. I mean, it's, Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast, where every Wednesday there are interesting guests, amazing ideas, solo streams, and discussions on a diverse array of topics from art, philosophy, history, and more. The free version will be available both here on YouTube and as a downloadable link on Anchor and Spotify, as well as on Substack. Each week, the full, uncensored, and spicier version will now be available on both Patreon and Substack, where you will have access to the full archive of both Content Minded and of Giant Reviews, where I break down interesting texts every week, including other exciting paywalled articles and good content. Thank you all. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless. Goodbye. Help keep the content renaissance alive. Too sweet.